All right, first I want to turn to Liv Finne. She is our Center for Education Director. Liv, I know you've got a new op-ed coming out soon, and you've been really focused on this issue of the reduction in learning opportunities for students. Why don't you tell us what's happening right now and where we're at?
Well, it's amazing to watch. Okay, here we are 2 years after COVID. Kids, the research is coming out very strong and hard and fast, saying that we must do something to help students recover from their pandemic learning loss caused by the COVID school shutdowns. Yet the state of Washington's, legislative committee on education are responding to the demands of the union to reduce the instructional hours that students get by 4 hours a week. And this happened last year. Last year they tried to do this. I forget the number of the bill, and they retreated in embarrassment when they tried to cut instructional hours by 20%. This year, they've reduced it a little bit by cutting our instructional hours by 13%. It's just an outrageous, out of touch, arrogant approach to the entire enterprise of education. And anyone with any common sense knows that more instructional hours is what's needed at this time, especially right now. Yet the union is pushing this bill, and it's 5054 and Dave, I've had quite a ride in the last week, because last week it was that's just a process statement. It was
Right.
It was moving towards being considered by the second house, the House of the House of Representatives has already been passed in the Senate on party line votes. Every Democrat voted to cut instructional hours by 4 hours a week. Every Republican voted against that. That was passed in the Senate. Then it went over to this House Education Committee. I testified against it. I wrote against it. And then last week I thought, oh my gosh, they're going to pass this at the end of last week. And then at the end of the week, it dropped from the executive calendar. So I thought all week, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe we're going to win this. Then Monday morning, yesterday, I see that they have put it back on the calendar. So I thought, oh no. So I wrote an editorial against it. And then at the end of the day, yesterday, I see it's been dropped off the executive calendar. So it's clear that even the union Democrats are concerned that this is not a good idea. So, but it's certainly not won yet, but it's on, right at the moment, it is not on the executive calendar, and it has to be decided by tomorrow if they're going to follow their cutoff rules, because that's the date for, this to be moved out of committee or the bill dies. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, it seems like one of the efforts might be, because last time it was more, this time it's 13%, and then they'll just ask for another 13% 2 years from now, and they'll actually get 26%. I mean, it's a crazy approach, especially in light of COVID. But isn't it true that the superintendent of public instruction is in a bit of denial about the learning loss that's taken place?
Oh, yes. Well, he came out at the beginning of the session saying there is no such thing as pandemic learning loss. And he wagged his finger at the assembled reporters and said, don't use that term, because our children are advancing in their recovery, or he's had some such Orwellian term to turn. I mean, as a leader of the state, the top education leader in the state, to be faithfully representing the need of children to get an education, he should have been calling at the beginning of the session for $1 billion of spending to help children recover learning loss. We're not going to get that. We may get $70 million if it passes in the budget. That's $70 per student in the state. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm not impressed. That is not going to do much of anything. So, it's very, I've been thinking about this sort of mindset. The union learned a very damaging lesson during the COVID school shutdown. That basically, if they decide not to reopen the schools, no one can make them, not even the governor.
Well, they could, but they're not willing. I mean, there's no political entity willing to stand up to them. Right.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that there isn't a powerful enough entity in Washington state to countermand the union's desire to keep the schools closed. So what is the lesson they would take out of COVID? Oh, let's just do less work for the same amount of money. And that's what I see as the impulse behind these bills to cut instruction time by 20% or 13%, whatever they're trying to get. Now we'll see if we've managed to, push this back. There's been a great effort by grassroots groups of parents coming forth testifying against this bill, saying, "How dare you? How could you do such a thing?" And there have been thousands of people, registering. There was, I think, 1,100 people registering their opposition to this bill in the last go around in the House Education Committee, and only like 10 union people that are supporting it. So it's clearly wildly unpopular. Maybe the Democrats are saying, well, maybe we better not pass this bill this session, but it may come back next session.
It's interesting to me, let me play devil's advocate here a little bit, but it's interesting to me that, here's a case where the union wants non-certified personnel to take over teaching.
Yeah.
And historically, when there's been debates about school choice and private schools, if there's somebody who, say, majored in history teaching a history class, or majored in science teaching a science class, but they don't have that education certificate, there's been opposition among education association unions. But in this case, it's, hey, nothing to see here.
Yeah,
We've got
great. Such a great point.
Such a great point. Here they are, the most staunch defenders of this barrier to entry to this teaching profession. You have to get an education credential through a school of education, or else we won't let you in the classroom. Oh, that's so important. It's the only way that we can get qualified teachers before the schools, before the children. And yet here they're talking about handing over Fridays to classrooms full of non-certified school employees that don't have any training in education. I mean, it's absurd.
Now, wait, this would happen on a Friday?
Well, I'm sure it would. Okay.
Friday or a Monday morning, one of the,
Yes.
one of the two. It's a happy coincidence that such things usually happen on Fridays or Monday mornings.
Yes.
Real quickly, I did want to clarify one thing you were mentioning. You were saying that you would have encouraged the state to spend $1 billion. But by that, you're not saying just throw $1 billion at the problem. You're saying throw $1 billion at private tutoring for students to be able to adapt to that loss. It's so interesting to me, because otherwise, of course, there's a lot of people that say, Liv, I like the way you're thinking. Let's throw another $1 billion in our direction, but not actually use it for the students.
To clarify, great point. To clarify, okay, remember, we've got almost a $70 billion budget. So when I say let's spend $1 billion of the revenue that the taxpayers provide to educate children, let's give it directly to families. That would give every family about $1,000 to in an education savings account, let's say, to hire a tutor to evaluate where their child is and help them catch up in education. And why wouldn't we do that if that's the paramount duty of our state, which it is under the Constitution? But no.
Well, Denny Westneat had a column in the Seattle Times a while back, and you did a blog on it, I think, revealing that even small doses of tutoring or relatively minor expenses were having wonderful results in, I think, the North Seattle area. So it's a good reminder. Big things can happen, right?
Oh, absolutely. There was that Danny Westneat column told a story about a physics professor at UW or something who decided to focus on a low performing school in the northern part of Seattle. And he got a bunch of UW students to come volunteer twice a week and to help the kids catch up in math. And the school went from like 10% passing the state math test to 60% passing the state math test in a very short order of time. Wow. And so if there was an opportunity, so this is what we should be doing, but we're not getting this message from our leaders. And instead, they're trying to cut instruction. So what does that tell you? I have to say, I was just on listening to a webinar just now, and I have to tell you that there are now 4 states in the country, and since January, that have passed universal school choice. You realize I think it was yesterday morning, Governor DeSantis passed a universal school choice ESA for the state of Florida. That makes Florida the 4th state of the union to pass universal school choice since the beginning of January. Okay, that means that there are now 6 states in response to COVID. Other states have taken a very different direction. They've said, forget this. We're going to give parents access to public funding so they can select the school their child goes to, so they can find a school that is consonant with their values, so that they can avoid a system that they don't like. And so this is taking off. And I have a list of all the states that are on deck to consider school choice in the next few months. They are Alabama, Georgia, Indiana, Kansas, Missouri, Montana, Nebraska, Nevada, New Hampshire, Ohio, Oklahoma,
South Carolina, Tennessee, and Texas. So that is what's happening across the country. That is what the state superintendent doesn't want anyone to talk about, but we should be talking about what's happening. There is a juggernaut towards school choice right now, and it's in response to the COVID school shutdowns and the introduction of curricula that parents really don't want taught to their children in the schools. So it's very exciting. I'm very excited about this.
Real quick, before I let you go, Liv, there's a question that's come up. There was proposed legislation to increase the number of school days per year, maybe to counter the proposed reduction. How did that bill fare? How does that approach fare?
That was a bill in the Senate introduced by Senator Brad, gosh, I've forgotten his name, out of Wenatchee. He's the ranking Republican member on the Senate Education Committee, and his bill would have added 5 days of instruction to school, and that bill was killed in committee by the Senate Education Chair, Lisa Wellman. She's the prime sponsor of this effort to cut instruction hours by 4 hours a week.
Well, it'll be interesting to see if the bill moves forward, if Republicans offer some kind of amendment saying that if the instructional value is the same, then we no longer need a teaching certificate. You can just have an area of expertise in order to qualify for teaching. I'd enjoy being in the wings just to watch the debate on that one.
Right. Good point.
Liv, I appreciate the time. Good to hear from you. And folks, you can read more from Liv at washingtonpolicy.org.